Over the last 12 years of running Facebook ads, I have learned that the people who learn how to work smarter instead of harder get a lot more work done, and they get a lot better at the job. And after spending hundreds of millions of dollars for brands around the world, one of the things that I've truly learned to embrace is leveraging Facebook's free automated rules. And not only does it make your ads better and your bank account bigger, but the better you get at using them, the more money you will make. So in today's video, I'm gonna share my screen and show you step by step everything that you need to know so that you can copy and paste your way to success. We're gonna start with why automated rules matter, and also compare media buying back in the day versus best practices now. We're then gonna get into how to scale with automated rules, including my favorite system, the performance gate scaling. This is the foundation of everything. And I've been using it on ad accounts for over 5 years now, and it has fundamentally changed the entire game for me. And yeah, I'm gonna show you everything. We're also going to get into budget expansion with margin-based rules. We're going to talk about compounding growth versus hockey stick spikes. We're going to get into some advanced scaling with intraday triggers. We're going to touch on total loss investment concepts, as well as scaling broad campaigns versus the constraints of ABO. Now, all of that is talking about how to raise the budget, but we talked about how to work smarter instead of harder. So let's make the dollars go a lot further for us. This is what we call scaling efficiency. Now, before we get any further, I want to give you a quick example of what scaling efficiency really means. If you spend $100 and get 10 sales, great, your cost per purchase is $10. Now, if you can get 10% better, getting your cost per purchase down to $9, with that $100 you spent, you now get 11 sales, increasing your revenue by 10%. Now, that is a lot stickier than trying to keep the $10 CPA while scaling your budget by 10%. So what we're gonna do here is show you how to make your dollars work harder so that you don't have to spend more money to make more money. And then of course, how to combine all of this stuff so it's a completely hands-off scaling automated machine, which is super powerful. And full disclosure, I use this on all of my accounts. I had a brand once where I came in there spending $3,000 a day at a $60 cost per acquisition. After 9 months of combining these two sets of rules together, we got their cost per acquisition down to $12 and their daily budget up to $50,000. We actually chose to stop spending $30,000 a day to add 12 million EBITDA to the business. And they made way more money then than when we started. And I'll tell you this, I got in a lot of trouble for basically only having to work 45 minutes a day and spending most of my time at my desk watching Game of Thrones. That's what happened here. So let me tell you everything we're gonna cover about scaling efficiency with automated rules. First, we're gonna talk about auto optimizers, how they work, the eligibility, the reallocation, and the reactivation. Then I'm gonna show you step by step how to build auto optimizer rules, as well as get into stop loss rules and building sliding scale rules step by step. We're also going to talk about sliding scale rules when you have to make adjustments due to budget size. We're going to talk about optimization via spend thresholds, reactivation rules, and the 3-2-2 ad framework for the best quality signal. Remember that Facebook is a machine learning algorithm, so you have to be thinking about what you're teaching it. And when we're doing creative testing, having the highest quality data coming in gives you the best quality ads going out, which puts the most amount of money in your bank account with the least amount of work from you. That's what we're going to do today. And then I'm going to show you how to put everything together. We're going to get into the integration of the full system. And this is not only going to include theory, but I'm actually going to show you a visual map of the self-optimizing campaign flow. We're going to also talk about building your automated SOPs, how to scale without touching the budget, common challenges and their solutions, long-term growth through automation, and then we're going to end this with a final checklist before launch so that you could literally just take the screenshot, print it out, slap it on the wall, and make sure that every time you launch a campaign, you have these steps done. in that order. And I'm gonna show you every step of the way of how to get every one of those things done so that you can copy and paste your way to success. Remember, what you're gonna get today is more time in your life and more money in your bank account with more confidence every step of the way. All right, that being said, let's get started. Why automated rules matter. Let's be honest, day trading ads is dead. Manual media buying, known as day trading, is more and more becoming obsolete as advertisers shift towards automation for efficiency and scalability. Not only is this highly volatile, but also incredibly labor intensive with increasingly lesser benefit, if any. We also have to understand that humans are never close to perfect. Scaling profitably no longer depends on constant manual oversight, but on systems that optimize spend in real time. Automated rules allow you to allocate budget more intelligently, reduce costly human errors, and free up your time, making ad management less stressful and significantly more effective. And remember that AI is infinitely smarter than you. Facebook is a machine learning algorithm. The value of automation isn't just in reducing workload, but also in teaching the machine to know what success looks like. Training the algorithm is like training a dog. You reward good behavior and you limit the bad. More spend and more data to what you want creates more of that done without your control. I remember back in the day sitting down at my desk with like a Trente iced coffee, a 30-ounce iced coffee from Starbucks, no ice, and breaking out a notebook and a pen and going line item by line item of every single ad set, every single campaign. And we were spending $30,000 to $50,000 a day. It took me the entire morning just to go through everything and make some moves. And by sheer force of will, I was able to produce more profit. And that was great, but it also meant any day I was sick, we lost money. Any day where I was off my game, we lost money. On weekends, we lost money. If I went on vacation, we lost money. And with the automated rules that I'm going to show you today, all of that work has become completely unnecessary. And this is the exact system that I use to manage millions in spend. So let's take a moment to talk about media buying then versus now. The old way required constant manual oversight and monitoring, daily bid adjustments and micromanagement, heavy reliance on intuition and guesswork. Success depended on how quickly you could react to volatility, and you spent hours managing campaigns manually every single day. Now, the new way of doing it, what we do now, the modern media buying, is a proactive system to replace reactive effort. Smart automated rules optimize performance in real time. Intelligent scaling based on data, not instinct. And this is reducing the amount of times we have to spend managing the campaigns, and what took hours now can be done in minutes through automation. This is the exact system that I use to manage millions in ad spend in a couple hours a week. And you can 100% do this. All right? You can copy and paste your way to success. So, that all being said, let's get to it. And let's start with how to scale with automated rules. What we're gonna start off with here is performance gate scaling. This is the foundation of everything. And again, I've been using this for the better half of a decade now. And it is foundational in every single ad account. Performance gate scaling is a system that automatically increases or decreases your budget based on how well your campaign is performing against a predefined target cost per acquisition, or CPA. If your ads are doing well, you scale up gradually. If they're slipping, you scale down. This technique helps improve efficiency while preserving profitability without needing manual adjustments every day. What we're gonna get into is how you never need to touch the actual budgets in your ad account ever again. I promise. That is what you are going to get out of this. We're gonna talk first about budget expansion with margin-based rules. Rather than reacting to good or bad days, performance gate scaling is based on simple business rules based on trend analysis. We raise our budgets when performance is good, and we lower our budgets when performance is not. And performance gate scaling is really built on three simple guidelines. First, We use a trailing multi-day KPI average, perhaps the last 7-day CPA. We never scale past margin to ensure that we always stay profitable. And our results are campaign-based, not ad by ad. And I want to just dive into one of these points here, the never scaling past margin. What this means is that if our target cost is, say, $50, and we're coming in at a 45 CPA, that's 10% better than our average cost target. So as long as we scale the budget by less than 10%, we should still be profitable with every dollar that we spend. The whole point of performance-gated scaling is just scaling into this margin, but never moving to a point of unprofitable spend. And if you take advantage of that, you basically never have to do anything else. One of the core values of performance-gated scaling is that it allows you to take advantage of compounding growth rather than hockey stick spikes, which everybody gets excited about, but honestly sells you very short on the future that you deserve. The best growth is predictable and compounding, not explosive and erratic. Sustainable growth builds momentum over time instead of spiking and collapsing. Performance-gated scaling provides a stable, scalable growth model. Performance-gated scaling focuses on consistent, manageable budget increases and avoids volatile hockey stick growth patterns. Sharp spikes often lead to just as sharp crashes, creating instability. Remember that what you want is consistent growth all the time. If you spike your budgets and then everything dies, you might make a lot of money today and then lose 10 times as much over the next month chasing that high. And the best day you'll ever get when you spike your budget is a fraction of what every day could be if you grow it in a compounding, stable, scalable, projectable, and manageable fashion. And that's what this is gonna do completely for you, hands-free. Compounding growth improves long-term performance. Small gains stack over time, driving more reliable and sustainable results. This increases confidence across teams and decision makers. Predictable results make it easier to plan, allocate resources, and maintain momentum. The important thing to remember here is that when you're trying to grow a business, it's not just about how much money can I throw on the credit card on Facebook to make a day one profitability today. It's about being able to sustain that growth and understand cash flow and inventory and all sorts of other things that you need to manage to make sure that your get-rich-quick scheme that might end at the end of the week is actually something that could last for a couple of years and realistically something that you could sell to somebody else. I've been a part of over half a dozen exits in the 8-figure range over the last few years, and every single one of those brands did not rely on spiking their budget. What made those brands really attractive so that they could exit for over $10 million a piece, including one that went for $95 million, was the fact that they were able to project their growth and they didn't spike things. And when you can do all of that on less and less work, you become far more attractive. And at the end of the day, if you're trying to sell your business, then you really only have one product, a business that makes money, the most amount of money on the least amount of work, where you can sell it to somebody else and it's easy for them to continue to make money. That's the secret to making a lot of cash doing a business. So let's talk about how to set up performance-gated scaling to scale up your budgets without you ever having to touch the machine ever again. So first, we want to name the rule with our target and our threshold and the change that we're going to make. When you have a lot of rules in your account, it can be hard to track without good nomenclature. We want to apply this rule to all campaigns and then use campaign name for eligibility. When we're talking about the eligibility for a rule, those are things that can't be edited once you build the rule. So instead of trying to say only apply to this ad or this ad set or this campaign, we're going to apply it to everything and then use the campaign name to make something eligible or ineligible for that rule. That way that same business rule gets applied to everything universally and we don't have to do the work ever again. And isn't that really what it's all about? We also want to set our limit to prevent runaway spends, and you can always change this later. You also really should define your KPI. Don't use results. results can lead to many errors. Instead of using results, just clearly define the goal, purchase, lead, subscription, etc. It doesn't take any more time to pick one option versus the other. But if the rule misfires because you're being very ambiguous about what the target is, well then that might take you weeks to unpack, and it's a huge nightmare. I've made that mistake a bunch of times. This will save you a bunch of heartache and anguish. Just set your goal with what the goal actually is. We also want to remember that the time range is your data set. So what performance do you want the rule to reference? Now, every rule should be read from top to bottom. So let's read exactly what this rule in the example is. This is a performance gate scaling rule with a target of $50, and we're going to increase the daily budget by 5% if our trailing 7-day CPA is at $45. When we look at this, we have applied this to all active campaigns to increase the budget by 5%. Our maximum daily budget cap is $10,000. We're going to do this action once daily. We've set our conditions to cost per purchase being less than 45, and our campaign name needs to contain PGS. If it doesn't match all of those conditions, this won't fire. And lastly, when we look at the time range, that's basically saying over the last 7 days. So that's 7 days ago up into yesterday. Is our CPA across this campaign less than $45? If so, raise the budget by 5% until the budget is over $10,000. And at that point, we might have to go back and readjust our limits. Next, let's talk about how to use performance gate scaling to scale down a budget if the results just aren't good enough. So we want to set an upper threshold for the allowable CPA. Remember that costs can fluctuate, and as you scale, they can go up. So ensure that the machine has a little bit of wiggle room for learning. Also, our action frequency should not be more than daily. Meta is already going to push and pull your budget by up to 75% on any given day. Don't make multiple changes to the budget that it's pushing multiple times during the day as well. That just gets really crazy, and honestly, there's not much upside to it. Although, there is a hack to do that properly, and I'm going to get to that here in a little bit. We want to set our limits to establish minimums. Your budget should always be enough to get meaningful data. If you can't get your campaigns, ad sets out of the learning phase because your budget is too small, ultimately that campaign probably shouldn't be run. And instead of continuing to run rules to reduce the budget, you should probably just turn it off. We also don't need impression minimums. More parameters can cause more errors. And when we're scaling down the budget, we really want to just adjust this at midnight. Changing the budget midday can really affect pacing, and this is where we can just select the daily option. So like every rule, we're gonna read this from top to bottom, okay? Let's look at this one. This rule is a performance gate scaling rule with a target of a $50 CPA. We're going to reduce the budget by 5% if our CPA is over $55. So we apply to all active campaigns to decrease the budget by 5 and a minimum daily budget floor of $100. This action occurs once a day, and our cost per purchase has to be greater than 55, and the campaign name needs to contain PGS. And we're going to look back over the last 7 days. If any of these conditions aren't met, then this rule won't fire. And again, get rid of the impressions condition, sort of like how the cost per result is a thing that could go wrong. Let's not open ourselves up to any potential issue. We don't ever need to worry about the total number of impressions for this rule to apply or not apply, so just get rid of it. There's no value there, but it is something that could possibly one day potentially be a reason that something went wrong. It has absolutely happened to me every now and again, and I'm so annoyed every single time a rule doesn't fire and I see, oh, it has an impression count on it, or, oh, it's got a cost per rule parameter. It's just, you can avoid the headache. Just get rid of it and you won't need to struggle with that thing. It's the easiest fix, so let's just avoid the problem from ever being eligible or able to ever happen, okay? All right, let's keep going. Now, one of the things we didn't talk about is customization. You could have your rule run every 30 to 60 minutes, or maybe it happens only at midnight. But there are certain reasons and certain parameters where you might want this rule to run not every day or only at certain parts of days, and you can even adjust it to happen at several times in one day. So let me tell you more about how to do all of that. So when we're looking at how to set up our customization, remember that rules by default are going to be run roughly every 30 minutes. When we select custom, you can be far more tactical. You can select specific days and specific times. Sometimes the rules are best to not run every day or only at midnight. One of the examples of this that I use in a ton of accounts is raise the budget by 5% Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's a great example of not wanting the rule to run all the time, and it's not even running every single day. It's going to run at midnight on those specific days because I've decided to make a lot of business decisions around that, and it just really simplifies things. If you're already humming and you just want to increase the budget whenever you can, that's a great rule to put into place. And ultimately, that means your entire job is just make sure that rule fires more often than it doesn't. That's a really simple way of managing an entire ad account. You can also choose intraday blocks. It's even possible to choose different windows within the same day. And I'll tell you, this can be really fun and you can get really complex. The only places where I've really seen this work are when there are big swings in your business. One of the biggest things that comes to mind is when I was running the ads for Pizza Hut. I was also running them for Papa John's at the same time for what it's worth. And we used rules to automate delivery and optimization around the lunch rush and the dinner rush. We found that the data that came in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon was terrible. But if we flooded data at 10 o'clock in the morning and at 5 o'clock at night, we got a lot better impressions. And so there is a value to doing things here, but it's really sort of the edge case. I almost never run rules throughout the day at multiple times for anything in SaaS, lead gen, or e-commerce. But just know that there are specific use cases where this is totally applicable. Now, complexity is fun, but it also makes monitoring the results far more difficult. Remember the golden rule. Say it with me. Simple scales and complex fails. One more time, okay? Simple scales and complex fails, all right? The way you work smarter instead of harder is by figuring out how to solve your problem with the simplest solution. And really the only problem we're trying to solve is, can we spend more money? And the easiest way of getting there is the best path that you should take. Also remember that changes midday won't fully reflect until the next day. And what this really means is the way that Meta decides to spend your budget isn't even. So if you were to increase your budget by 100% at noon, say from $100 to $200, well, you're already 50% the way through the day. So realistically, instead of ending at a $200 daily budget, you might get closer to $150. Probably a little bit more, but also remember if you're gonna pull back by a lot and you've already spent enough, it's just not gonna actually equal what you want it to. So don't really expect that to be the case until the day afterward. Plus remember, Meta's gonna push and pull your budget by 75% anyway, so you could spend way more or way less than you intended to. So just be really mindful that the crazier you get here, the less that your change actually even matters. So before we get into some best practices here, I want to touch on sliding scale rules. Now there's a couple of reasons that we're going to use these rules, and we'll get to those in a minute. But what we just addressed is basically saying any amount of spend over the last 7 days, if our efficiency is X, do Y. Now, there's a couple of reasons why that might not be the best choice. First, in your version of the ad account, Meta might not let you make an adjustment to the budget in a CBO campaign based on a cost per result. Also, you might have different thresholds depending on the scope and scale of your business. And I'm going to get to that a little bit more here after I show you how to build the rule, because it'll make a lot of sense when we get into it, okay? So here's how to build a sliding scale rule. We use sliding scales when a cost per result rule cannot be applied. Remember that Meta restricts some accounts from running rules based on CPA targets. And in this case, we can set our range to imply a target CPA. We can imply that CPA with a spend range and a conversion volume. So an example might be, if you spent $100 with more than 5 sales, your CPA is going to be below 20 bucks. These rules can be run on a trailing trend or intraday. Now, one thing that I recommend here is that you set these rules to run continuously. Because there's a spend threshold, in this case $100, unless that's your daily budget, you probably want to understand what's going on. And that's where these can be more tactical, almost day trading level rules if you want them to be. You also want to set ranges to cover expected spend levels. So use graduated thresholds like 5x, 10x, 20, 35, 50, 75, 100 times your target CPA. So like all rules, let's read this from top to bottom so that we understand what we're doing, and then we can get into really advanced stuff. So this rule is a performance gate scaling sliding scale rule with our target being a $20 CPA at $100. And if that happens, we're gonna raise the budget by 5%. We're gonna apply it to all active campaigns and increase the budget by 5% with a maximum daily budget cap here of say $10,000. And we're only gonna do this once per day. Now the conditions here is we're gonna spend somewhere between $100 and $120, and the number of purchases needs to be greater than 5 in that spend level. Now we could have this run today. We could also have this run on a trailing 3-day or even a trailing 7-day level. The beautiful thing here is that you can use these rules to help scale budgets over time, especially if you're not getting a lot of conversions and you're not spending a lot of money. Maybe your budget is only 10 or 20 bucks a day. You could put this over the last 7 days and say, hey, over the last $100 spent, if you're good enough, I'm willing to begin to inch my budgets up. Also, you could use this in multiple stages so that as your spend goes from $100 to $200 to $500 to $1,000 a day, you can set those specific parameters to say, look, if I've spent between this much money and this much money and my results are this or better, then I'm willing to continue to invest more. And that's because at the end of the day, if I raise my budget by that much, even if I don't get any extra sales above the pacing that I'm currently at, my blended CPA is still going to be less than my target. Remember, we're scaling into margins. We're not scaling past our margin, okay? That's really key here. So in this example here, if we've spent $100 and we get 6 sales, even if we were to raise the budget by 5% to $105, we would still be well below that $20 CPA that our target is. So we'd be comfortable spending that money. And if this happens today or over the last week, these are really good data sets that we can use to never have to touch the budgets again, making sure that we only scale into the allowable margin. And while we raise the budget, we never lose profitability. Now, the fact that you can do that for free without ever having to touch the machine is incredible. Remember, this is about working smarter, not harder. This is how we manage a lot of accounts and scale them without having to do a whole lot of work. If you have to micromanage your employees, it probably means you're not great as a boss. This is how to set up the machine to never need you again. All right, that all being said, let's get into some Disruptor School best practices before we move on to getting even deeper with these rules to scale your account. Remember that the CPA on Meta is not the same as what you see in your business as a blended all-in CPA. Your target needs to take into account that you have sales from other channels. You know that you get sales from organic and from email and from Google, or wherever else you're getting sales from, affiliates and influencers and all of that. We have to remember that the Facebook CPA is never 100% accurate. Now, maybe Facebook says, let's go over a quick example of this. Let's say Facebook platform says that it made 10 sales, but in your business you see 15 sales and you're willing to spend up to $50 to make a sale. Well, if you know that Facebook's responsible for 2/3 of the sales, but not all of them, that means that that $50 target is for your blended CPA, not the Facebook one, which means your Facebook CPA allowable level is probably well over $60. So make sure to keep that in mind when setting your budgets for what your margin can be, because odds are you're already not spending enough because you could afford to spend more to get the sales, because Facebook isn't your only source of traffic. Remember that the best data set is your last 7 days. This avoids spikes and rounds out the good days and the bad days, while still allowing you to take advantage of opportunity and not burn cash when things go poorly. And also, you learned it as a kid and it's still true today. Slow and steady wins the race. 2% a day or 5% 3 times a week will give you close to 100% growth every single month. Gradual changes allow for steady performance and the ability to track the impact on other channels and optimize those as well. Remember, we talked about maybe your Facebook ads drive 10 sales and your overall business gets 15. But if you double your ad spend, maybe Facebook says it's getting 18 sales and your overall business is getting 25. The percentage of sales that are responsible from Facebook is going to change when it becomes a larger spending piece of your media mix. And what that really means is that as you scale your Facebook ad budget, don't forget to also scale your Google budget. And don't forget to also work on the conversion rate and the AOV and all the other things in your business. Really, if you getting to the point where that Facebook CPA is a little too high, it probably means you haven't looked at other ways that you make money in your business that you could take more advantage of. Facebook is the top of the funnel. If you double the top of the funnel, odds are it's a really easy way to make more money if you just add more budget to lower funnel marketing efforts, like search. And I see so many people just forget to raise their search budget after doubling or tripling their Facebook one. And it's just the easiest money in the world. And that also means your target on the platform is something that's going to change. And we'll get more into that here in a little bit. But what I love about this more than anything is that your job becomes very singular. The only thing you have to do is try to make sure that that rule that raises the budget fires more often than it doesn't. Anything that gets in the way of that rule firing is the only thing that you really need to be worried about. And sometimes the easiest way to make sure that rule fires is by raising your allowable, by improving the rest of the business. So now let's get into advanced scaling with intraday triggers. For more aggressive situations, intraday rules can trigger budget changes during the day when certain thresholds are met. For example, if a campaign hits a CPA target early in the day, a rule can increase the budget midday. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's because this is basically surf scaling, and you can completely automate it, which is really cool. Now, quick tip, I don't often use surf scaling. I think it can be really volatile and I like to look for long-term success. But we can do a thing called soft surfing. Now, before I gave the example of raising your budget 5% 3 times a week, right? So let's say my target cost is 50 and I'm coming in at a 45. I'll gladly raise my budget 5% 3 times a week. But what if I'm coming in at like a 42? Or a 43, or maybe a 38 over the last 7 days? I'm willing to raise my budget, say 1% every day that's true. So when we're really far away from our target, because we're just doing really well, we can be more aggressive with a constant change. And remember, one of the reasons we want to have constant changes is because of those things that we talked about with search and email and conversion rate and AOV and all of that stuff. When you make dramatic changes at the top of the funnel, you send large amounts of volume of unqualified traffic through your entire machine, it's really hard to understand what's going on. But when you slowly turn up the volume, it becomes really easy to see where you have more opportunity and where things are breaking. And when you do that slowly, things break a lot less, and you can stay days or weeks ahead of any reason that you would ever say no to raising your budget on any given automated rule. Before we go any further, I also want to touch on the concept of total loss investment. Performance gate scaling uses the concept of a total loss investment when scaling your budgets. Every budget increase is treated as a controlled, low-risk investment. Remember our example of scaling by 5%. If we get no extra sales, that still keeps our CPA protected. Small increases ensure that even in the worst case scenarios, your margin absorbs the impact. Now, I know we're talking about a lot of stuff, and if you have any questions on it, please drop it down below. Now, one of the things that I really try to stress when people join Disruptor Academy or the MBA program, there's a link down below, by the way, soft plug, here's a little, throw up the QR code, thank you. All right, there we go. Now, one of the things that I try to stress to people when understanding scaling your budget is that you basically want to say, if I were to raise my budget by this much money and Facebook attributed no additional sales, my blended CPA would still be okay. Going back to our example here of raising the budget by 5%, say our target is 50 and we're coming in at a 45, that's 10% better. If we spent 5% more money and got no additional sales attributed to our Facebook ad campaign, we're still okay. Now, the fun thing is, if you raise your budget by 5%, you're gonna reach more people. Odds are you're gonna get more searches on Google and Bing, and you're gonna get a couple more email addresses. That money isn't a complete loss. But if we assume a complete loss and we're still profitable with it, well, that's a great way of making sure that we never lose money and we're only ever making a lot more. Again, without having to do any work. When you set up the machine, it'll do all of this for you automatically, and it's free. This really minimizes decision stress during scaling. You're not risking profitability on aggressive jumps, just making smart, measured moves. And this protects overall account performance even when results fluctuate. Predictable downside means fewer surprises and more stable growth. The goal is to make small, controlled bets, not big, risky leaps. This keeps performance consistent while compounding growth over time. Now, before we get into optimization, I just want to touch on scaling in a broad campaign versus the complexities of an ABO campaign and why we really just don't ever use that anymore. When scaling broad campaigns, this leverages Meta's full optimization power, maximizing scalability and efficiency, which reduces audience fatigue and simplifies your structure for better database decision making. And optimization is handled by rules, not guesswork. And remember that the automation here isn't just the rules that we're setting up today. It's also letting Meta Andromeda, powered by all of those wonderful NVIDIA super chips and all of their custom hardware, do a lot of the hard work for us. That's why we're using a CBO to choose which ad set should get the spend. And we're having simplified one campaign structures with flexible ads, using the best quality ads that we should be using for the highest quality and volume of data in the fewest amount of places, so we have the smartest machine doing the best work for us, so we show the right ad to the right person at the right time and scale our budgets without ever having to touch the machine. And we're gonna get into how to build those best ads here in just a little bit. But let's get back to the old way of doing things, the ABO. The constraints of ABO is that it really limits Meta's optimization ability and increases cannibalization exponentially. This creates budget inefficiencies and accelerates audience fatigue. It overcomplicates campaign structure and impedes insight value, and requires constant manual oversight. The number one thing that I want you to take away from this is that in a CBO campaign with automated rules set at the campaign level, you only need to say, is my campaign good enough to raise the budget? And at that level, you can say, are my ads good enough to get me to that blended result? If you have an ABO campaign, it's kind of like having a whole bunch of campaigns, and you have to move them all independently, and they're all competing against each other. And your ability to make a really well-informed decision about the collective nature of all of those ads cannibalizing each other is basically completely impossible. So you're ultimately just chasing best result without taking into context how that impacts the whole of your advertising campaign. Really, ABO is just old school, and not like in a cool way. It's just kind of shit. You shouldn't really be using it. Yes, there's a few instances where I do use them, but those are few and far between, and we've got a lot of other material to cover today because I want to try to keep this video under 2 hours. But let me tell you this. Should you use ABO? 99% of the time, the answer is no. And if you're just trying to scale your business, the answer is no, okay? Just don't even worry about that right now. You are not in the place where that luxury problem is something you should be concerned with. Now, before we get into optimization with automated rules, I know you have a lot of questions. We're covering a lot of things. Ask them in the comment section down below. I will get back to you as fast as possible. I actually pride myself on not leaving any comments unread and unresponded to for more than a couple hours max. And if you want more help, there's links down there too for the Disruptor Academy. I highly recommend you jump into it. There's a reason why hundreds of people are joining all the time, and the success is basically omnipresent. So all that being said, let's get into the optimization of your ads with automated rules, so you don't even have to worry about creative testing or turning ads on or off ever again. Like, the machine will do all of it for you. Optimization. This is about scaling efficiency, not spend. Going back to our example from earlier in this video, if you spend $100 and get 10 sales, that means your cost per sale is $10. If you can get that CPA scaled on the efficiency level by 10%, that means the CPA drops from 10 to 9 and you get 11 sales for that $100. You don't need to spend any more money or work any harder. You're just making more money. This is a far more effective way of scaling the profit volume that you actually get to put in your back pocket. Remember that revenue isn't profit, and what actually matters is what you take home. And if you can scale your efficiency while scaling your spend is really easy. Because remember, we're only going to scale into our margin. And this means we can really start to stack some things together, and it gets really fun. And here's how to do all of it completely for free with automation, so that you never actually have to touch your ads ever again. True scaling happens when your dollars work harder, not just when you spend more. With automated rules, your budget is redirected towards top performing ads, allowing you to grow volume while actually improving your CPA. You're scaling efficiency, not just ad spend, unlocking exponential returns by amplifying what works. And this brings us to auto optimizers, okay? So what are auto optimizers? Auto optimizers are tools that dynamically manage your campaigns by turning off underperforming ads and reallocating budget towards your top performers. These use rules based on CPA thresholds and spend levels to make decisions in real time. The result is improved efficiency, better learning signals for Facebook's algorithm, and a reduced reliance on manual oversight. Auto optimizers work on 3 principles: eligibility, reallocation, and reactivation. So let me break down how to do all of that by sharing my screen so you can copy and paste your way to success. Okay. Remember that you can build a rule that turns off ads when their CPA exceeds a certain threshold, perhaps 10% worse than your target, only after enough spend has occurred to be statistically significant. For example, if your target CPA is $50, you might turn off any ad that's over $55 CPA after it's spent 6 times that amount, say $330. These rules ensure that bad ads get paused automatically, protecting your account. So let's go ahead and build an auto optimizer rule step by step. I'm going to share my screen to show you everything that you need to know. Okay, let's get to it. When you're building this rule, you want to start by defining your target CPA. Like our other rules, we're going to use campaign or even ad level naming conventions to designate rule eligibility. And you'll see in this example, my particular shorthand is #AO. There's no reason I'm going to type #AO into campaign names or ad names unless I want it to be eligible for an auto optimizer rule. Also, we need to make sure that we set our evaluation windows, perhaps over the last 7 days, to ensure trend-based decisions. Remember that the purpose of an auto optimizer rule is ultimately to eliminate the guesswork and manual labor required to turn ads on or off. And also, we can do this on a trailing 7-day or even intraday. And we'll get to more of that rolling ad eligibility and a whole bunch of other stuff here in a little bit. but I really want to start at what's simple. And then we're gonna build on that foundation, because the honest truth is there's a lot of tools in this toolbox and every single one of them has a specific use case, and I wanna make sure that you are armed with the best information to make the best choices, to have the most powerful machine that requires the least amount of work so you can make the most amount of money. Yeah, that's what this is all about. So now let's read this rule from top to bottom, which we do with every rule to check our work. This rule is an auto-optimizer rule with a threshold target set at $50 and a 6x times spend with a 10% allowable range. So that's $330 at a $55 cost per acquisition. This is going to apply to all active ads, and the rule is going to turn off the ad. The conditions that need to apply are a spend over $330, with the purchases being less than 6, and the campaign name contains hashtag AO. The time range is going to be today, but it could also be trailing 3 days or trailing 7, or even maximum if we want to use this as a creative optimization tool. And I almost always will run this on continuously or a daily range. I rarely ever do this on some custom level. Now you don't have to do that manually ever again. We also, and we'll get to a bit more of this later, we can have ads cycle in and out of eligibility based on certain thresholds. So this ad might be a great ad for us most of the time. Maybe it's a great prospecting ad, but we also know that at some point in time, it's just gotten a little too much spend and our average got a little too high, so we turn it off, which means we're not filling the bucket anymore. Our funnel is now based purely on more retargeting ads, and that's okay. Now, if we never turn this ad back on, our funnel would dry up. But if it's only off for a day or two, well, we say the funnel is full, let's take advantage of what we got. And then as soon as it kind of dries up, we're willing to let this thing run again. And that's how this is built. We'll get to more of that here later, how to really execute and how all of this stuff works together. But I hope you're beginning to see just how incredibly powerful this is. Plus, again, and we're going to get to this more in a little bit, but you could do that and just lower your thresholds regularly so your CPA continues to come down and add budget increases. So not only are you working smarter, but you're working harder. You can do both, and like things get crazy. Remember that brand where I got them from a 60 to a 12 and from 3,000 to 50? And we ended up saving $12 million a year and making way more money. This is what I did. And I'm literally showing you every step of the way because why not? All right. So that being said, let's keep going. Now, another way of looking at these rules, or if you want to think of it this way, the first level in your sliding scale ladder can be thought of as a stop loss rule, which is basically your first layer of protection. Stop loss rules are intraday guardrails designed to cut spend from underperforming ads before excess budget is wasted. For instance, if an ad spends a predefined amount, say $80 without a sale, or exceeds a CPA threshold midday, it can be paused immediately. These rules help limit exposure to poor performance while allowing a reset at midnight. Again, your stop loss rule could be used as a creative testing device to help you basically just turn off anything that just sucks. Or it could be used as an intraday eligibility device to say, hey, some ads just fell outside of allowable for now, turn them off and maybe they can come back to work tomorrow or a little bit later. And we'll get to all that more later, but I hope that you understand these rules can be used for creative testing and optimization. I really want to drive that point home. They can have two different uses depending on how you build them, okay? All right, let's keep going. So now let's go about building all of those sliding scale rules that we talked about before. But instead of using them to increase budget, we can use them to optimize the ads that we have. Again, instead of using them to spend more, we can use it to make our dollars work harder, okay? All right, this is gonna be fun, I promise. And it'll be a little confusing, but I'm gonna share my screen and show you every step of the way. All right, let's get to it. So when building sliding scale rules, this is the step-by-step process you need to know. First, sliding scale rules allow for flexibility. Higher budget campaigns, they can have stricter thresholds for cost control. Think of cost caps, only without using a predictive bidding model, you can just use automated rules and get the same job done, just with way lower CPMs and way lower ad fatigue for way more stable and predictable results. You never have to run cost caps ever again. And for lower budget campaigns, you get more leniency to allow for data maturity. Remember, the difference at $100 of 4 sales versus 5 is like a $5 CPA difference. That could be big. But at 49 to 50, it's pennies. So at smaller levels, we need to have a bit more bandwidth, because ultimately, if one extra sale is the difference between something being not good enough and great, well, your threshold is a bit too focused. Because if the difference between not good enough and really great is 1 or 2 sales, then your thresholds are just too constraining. You want to adjust your rules based on campaign stage and budget size to balance efficiency and learning. And again, your campaigns might be small budget, they might be big budget, and it's really not about the amount of money spent nearly as much it is about the volume of transactions or the volume of conversion events that those campaigns are driving. If you have a $2 cost per lead, $20 is 10 conversion events. If you have a $100 cost per sale, a $200 budget is only 2 conversion events. So in that case, a $20 budget is a much higher budget allowable than the $200 when we're talking about these campaigns, okay? So budget is more focused on the volume of things that you're buying, not necessarily the cost of them. I hope that makes sense. Again, if you have any questions, drop them down below. Okay, let's keep going. These rules can be used for lifetime or trailing average optimizations. And we want to make multiple rules to address each stage of the sliding scale ladder. Now, like we've done before, what I want to do is just read this rule from top to bottom, because that's how we read the rule. Now, the name of this rule says that it's a sliding scale example with a $50 target CPA at a 10 times that target threshold. And that basically means that if it's less than 9, we're gonna fire the rule. This is gonna apply to all active ads, and the rule is gonna turn off the ad. Now, in order to be eligible, the rule needs to match all of the following conditions. First, the ad needs to contain the name sliding scale. The spend needs to be greater than 500, which is 10 times the $50 CPA. And the volume of conversions, or in this case, purchases, needs to be less than 9. And again, what this is doing is it's implying that range, right? If you have 9 sales at 500, you're really close to the same cost per purchase as 10 sales. But if you're only at like 6 or 7, you're pretty far away. And again, that's that like 10% over. It's the same thing as the CPA target, but sometimes you can't use CPA targets on CBOs, and you want to kind of do this 2 different ways. That's why I'm letting you understand this, because also you might not want that CPA target to really be applied to anything hasn't spent enough. And really, this is just about giving you another way of solving the problem based on spend levels or your targets. Maybe you're using the auto optimizer to cycle ads in and out of eligibility, but you're using the sliding scale more as a stop loss rule. Like, however you want to combine them, I'm giving you different tools for your tool bag here, because there's more than one way to get the job done. And honestly, I use these interchangeably, but different accounts and different situations, different campaigns have different needs. So I'm letting you see how we solve that problem so you can find the right solution for you. Now, you can run this against the lifetime to basically make it a maturing stop loss, where you're saying, I know it's not 0 sales, but as we spend more money, your efficiency has to get better and better. Totally fine. You do that all the time. Or you could run it as a trailing 7 to bring ads in or out of eligibility. That is also totally fine. And we're gonna get how to bring ads back into eligibility here in just a minute. But I want you to understand, again, the right tool for the job, understanding what your needs are, and ultimately, is this an optimization of proven winners, or is this a way of managing your creative testing of ones that you don't necessarily have confidence in yet? That's the way I want you to think about this stuff. All right, let's keep going. So your sliding scale rules need to be addressed by budget size. The rule requirement is to be within an allowable range of the target. This creates a dynamic optimization by implying a cost per result that is close enough to be acceptable. Now, an example of this that I use all the time is to basically say, you need to be within like 1 or 2 sales, okay? So at 500 spend, where I should have at least 10, you need to have at least 9. At 1,000, we should have 20. Let's at least have 19. And this goes on, and really what this means is the range from the allowable gets smaller and smaller. And that really helps us maintain overall efficiency. The more spend an ad gets, the better it has to be to continue to earn more spend. And this is how you scale the winners without having to isolate them. This is how you turn off bad ads that are kind of good enough but not quite, without them getting too much budget. You can do this. You can sit down with a sheet of paper or just use ChatGPT and figure out your thresholds. I highly recommend you start here, but also understand this is a rough guideline. But the ultimate goal of this is that as an ad earns more and more budget, it has to get better and better at its overall average performance to maintain eligibility for future spend, which we should see. All things being equal, if an ad gets more budget, it gets more data. As long as you haven't abused it, it should get smarter, and smarter ads behave better. And that's kind of the whole idea here. Plus, some ads are great at small scale, but break at bigger ones. Let's just protect ourselves here in a way that is done completely automatically, completely free. Like, I can't believe this is free. So now let's get to the reactivation. I think we've teased it enough. This is a reactivation rule for previously paused ads. Optimization doesn't just stop at turning ads off. It often includes knowing when to reactivate those ads. We can use rules that scan paused ads and to check if they've recently dropped below your CPA target with sufficient spend. If yes, the ad is automatically reactivated, giving it another chance to perform. So let me give you an example of kind of how this works, okay? Now, let's say we're using a trailing 7-day average. Now we have some good days and some bad days. And let's say we had some good and some bad, but there's a collection of rough ones, and by Wednesday, the last 7 days just look tough. Okay, so we're not spending more on Wednesday. And then we don't spend more on Thursday. But by Friday, over the last 7 days, some of those bad days that we had towards the end of last week, well, they're not really being represented anymore. So now it's just kind of the good days that are left. So now that blended average of total spend and the amount of conversions that we got looks good enough. And in that case, we're willing to fire that thing back up. Another thing to think about, you can have ads get conversions even after the ad is turned off. It totally happens all the time that you turn an ad off and tomorrow it gets a sale. So if you turn that ad off on Wednesday, you might get a sale on Thursday and Friday, and now that blended CPA all of a sudden begins to look pretty good again. Plus, those bad days are behind us, and look, this ad was good enough for us to spend on anyway, so you can come on back. It's basically like saying, hey, Bob had a bad day at the office, take a day or two, come on back. We love you, just get right. Totally fine. Your ads can have a sick day. Another way of looking at this is if you're doing more intraday style rules, is that if the ad just earns too much money today and doesn't do good enough, turn it off. But we know it's good, so it can come back to work tomorrow. In this case, Bob's having a bad day, and you just be like, hey, go home, sleep it off, I'll see you in the morning. And then they come back on. When they come back in, they're not gonna necessarily see the same spend they did before, because other ads that weren't getting spend because it was on are now getting more budget. And so you're basically kind of forcing a little bit of the shuffling of the deck and letting other things that might not have gotten as much spend but may have performed better, they're going to get more data. So basically, water's going to kind of find its level. The deck is getting shuffled to an optimum level. And so those ads that just didn't quite get a chance now get an opportunity to get a foothold. And the ads just soak up all the budget, but if they get turned off all the time, well, the machine's just not going to spend on them as much anymore because they're getting penalized when they do, and because other options are now more desirable for the machine to invest in. And this really kind of reduces the up and down of the account and stabilizes performance. And your job is basically just make that mid-level a little bit better, or keep it at where it is, because that means you can spend more money. And again, we're gonna either try to work harder or spend more money. And that's really what this is all about. So a couple of Disruptor School best practices before we go on to some really advanced stuff. Okay, always use reactivators if you've set to a trailing average. If you have not decided to use your auto-optimizer ads as a creative testing model, but instead to make things eligible or ineligible, always have reactivators. I can't tell you how many times people just say, oh, if you're not good enough, you're dead, and then just constantly doing new things. Sometimes that ad just spent a little too long at the top of the funnel, and it filled up the funnel, and you had to send it away for a while, but now your funnel's all dried up and you want it back. That's totally fine. That happens all the time. Just do me that solid, all right? And by the way, you can also set in your reactivator that it doesn't contain the keyword keep off or kill or whatever else. So you can basically say an ad is eligible for all of this stuff, and now it's not. And that's how we control that kind of stuff. Cool. To scale efficiency, you can also reduce the target as the spend goes up. You could say at 500, you need to have 9 sales. At 900, you need to have 19. And by 1500, you need to have 39. You could force down the average cost of your ads the more money they spend. And this is totally fine and great, especially if you're in a situation where you're prospecting ads. Again, according to 4PI, they sit higher in the funnel, run away with budget all the time. Great. And your retargeting ads don't see as much money. Great. Well, what if those prospecting ads run away with the budget and then get turned off? We can have this kind of sliding scale that says prospecting ads, the more budget they get, the better they have to be. And we'll let the retargeting ads that kind of stay below that line anyway just stay on. As long as they're good, they're continuing to improve. The point is you're getting more and more conversions below the average cost, which teaches the machine to get you more conversions below that average cost. And you could even begin to take your average from a 50 as your target when you start to 45. When I took that brand from 60 to 12, we started at a 65. Then about a week or two later, we moved from a 65 to a 55. And then like a 50. And we just notched down every couple of weeks by another $3 to $5 on average. Now it took us 9 months. But again, we cut that cost per conversion from 60 to 12 while scaling up the budget from 3,000 a day to over 50. And it's by doing this exact thing that I'm showing you today. Okay, let's keep going. I also highly recommend that you confirm or redefine your targets once monthly. Your goals are gonna change with economies of scale or seasonality. Like we talked about before, if you go from spending $100 a day on Facebook to 1,000, the lift you're gonna get to email and to Google and everywhere else is gonna be greater. So the conversion volume that you're getting from different channels is gonna change. And conversely, if you go from 2,000 a day on the platform to 500, you're gonna get way larger percentage of your overall sales coming from other channels, which means that your target on this platform doesn't need to be as good. And so if we adjust that maybe once a month, you're probably gonna see that it moves a little bit all the time. Plus, seasonality really plays an impact, right? Q4, let's be more aggressive than Q2. That's pretty straightforward, right? If nobody's buying in June, maybe you're letting it go a little bit more. But in Q4, when everybody's buying, let's just get all the cheapest things we can. Like, you can adjust things. Remember, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to ask for permission. Just do the best job you can. And understand that your marketing mix changes often, okay? The better you get at search and email, probably the worse your CPA can be on Facebook. And that's sort of the goal. Whoever can spend the most to get the sale wins the game, right? And so it's not just about the platform, it's about everything. Okay. Also remember that every business objective is gonna have a different target, right? Now you've seen this if you're running cost caps where you're set some at 50 and some at 45 and some at whatever it is, but you might find that different business objectives have different targets. If it's a prospecting ad, your target might have to be, that ad can't get over like a 55. If it's a retargeting, maybe it can't spend more than 50, whatever it happens to be. So understand what that looks like and use nomenclature to address your eligibility. Now we did a very simple example, but it could be AO retargeting, AO prospecting, and now a complete set of rules for ads that, according to 4PI analysis, get more of the budget with a lower frequency and a lower CPM and aren't nearly as efficient. They maybe get set to a different set of rules than ones that get a higher frequency and a higher CPM. They don't get nearly as much spend, but are way more efficient, right? You can find that balance. And really, if you can get the more efficient ones to get a bit more spend, and you get the less efficient ones to not spend as much, you're gonna get a better result. So that's really what this is all about. So real quick, I wanna talk about the 322 ads to maximize your signal quality. Now, if you don't know about a 322 ad, I've made a bunch of other videos for it. But the reason it's important here is instead of running 24 ads and having to be really restrictive, because if 24 ads all spend 50 bucks, that's $1,000, that's 1,200 bucks. But if it's, say, 2 322 ads, that same $1,000 you can spend, well, now that ad, instead of spending 50, could spend 500 or 600. Right? Fewer number of ads that are actual individual line items, the greater the thresholds that you can apply to each ad, if you're trying to get to good results. And again, it comes down to whoever can spend the most money to get the customer gets the sale. And 322 ads have a compounding value to them. I'm not here to make that conversation today. I'm just letting you know that 322 ads lets you spend 12 times as much per ad as building out all of the ads individually. That just seems like a no-brainer. Now, remember, you can use auto optimizers to test creative at scale. Auto optimizers allow you to test multiple creatives with a single campaign while keeping performance data clean and actionable. Underperforming creatives are going to be paused automatically, while top-performing variations receive more spend. This removes the guesswork from the testing process and prevents poor ads from consuming budget unnecessarily. So before we get into just implementing this entire system, I want to cover a couple common misconceptions and some mistakes, okay? Let's just get those out of the way, and then we can get to the really fun stuff. All right. Many advertisers unknowingly sabotage their campaigns by using flawed optimization approaches. Here are some of the most common mistakes and why they matter. They use cost per result instead of conversion-specific metrics. Remember, don't put cost per result, put cost per purchase, cost per lead. This can happen because sometimes generic results can be misleading. Also, the machine just might screw up. Like, that's also in the cards, right? It's not 100% perfect all the time, so make it easy for it to not make mistakes. And you want to make sure that you're tracking the event that actually matters, right? Not just results. Also, some people will set the rules without minimum spend thresholds. If you apply a rule before an ad is really spent enough to prove any statistical meaningful data, you risk turning off ads that could have worked. Let ads spend a reasonable amount of money before judging performance. And the honest truth is, you're the only one who can answer what this looks like. How many ads do you have? How much do you need to win? How good are your ads currently? What's your daily budget? Like, the more you need to win, probably the more restrictive and the higher volume of ads that I'm gonna run. And if I'm doing really well and I'm just trying to launch 2-3-2-2 ads against some proven assets and I'm willing to let them run as long as they don't shit the bed, then I'll have my threshold set much higher. Because ultimately, I'm trying to take advantage of that long tail data set, and I'm not in any rush to win. I don't need to pull a lottery ticket to get rich quick because I already have a system that works. Far too often, people are reacting to daily performance instead of trends. Optimization should be based on performance over at least 3 days, if not 7. Making changes based on single-day results leads to inconsistency and disrupts the algorithm learning. And over-relying on manual tweaks instead of systems. Human decisions introduce bias and inconsistency. You can't make the right choice every time. You are going to be emotionally invested in some stuff and just lose money because of it. In the end of the day, no one ad is the reason you're going to be successful or not. You are training an entire machine learning algorithm. You have a computer program designed by some of the smartest people in the world with more data than anything else in the history of mankind making choices for you. Your job is to give it the best chance to succeed without you manually micromanaging it. Otherwise, you kind of miss the whole point. Automated systems can handle optimization at scale, freeing your time and improving results. So that brings us to my favorite part, the integration, the full system. This is going to be fun. We're going to link optimization, scaling, and creative testing into one completely cohesive system. And this is where you really start to cook, okay? This is the payoff, I promise. The true power of automated rules comes from when you have integrated scaling, optimization, and creative testing into one cohesive system. Each component feeds the other. Scaling boosts reach. Optimization ensures efficiency, and creative testing supplies fresh assets to keep performance high. Together, they create a flywheel effect where better data leads to better decisions and compounding growth. Okay, so before I promise you a visual map, so here it is. Check this out. This is your self-optimizing campaign flow. You have a flow from creative testing that rolls into auto-optimizer rules with some stop-loss protection, some scaling rules, and some reactivation logic. And really this works because your new creatives flow in through a structured test framework. Your auto-optimizers manage the distribution of spend. Your stop-loss rules remove the risk of waste. And your scaling rules drive the growth, while your reactivation ensures that no winner is left behind. And so that is the system at work. And it takes a while to set it all up properly, but it is 100% worth the investment. So now let's talk about building your automated standard operating procedures. Systematizing your strategy means writing standard operating procedures for your account. You want to define naming conventions, rule thresholds, evaluation timelines, and test protocols. Write this down. I highly recommend pen and paper, and for brands that are not sharing an office or teams that are greater than one person, put it in an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Sheet, have it documented, have it so that everybody can see it. You need accountability, you need visibility. Otherwise, someone's gonna make a mistake, and you should welcome people checking your work, and you should challenge all of these things on a regular basis. Otherwise, you're not nearly taking advantage of the machine that you've built. You have a Ferrari to go grocery shopping. That is fun, but you can do so much more. This turns Facebook ads from a guessing game into a repeatable business process. SOPs help you scale performance without relying on daily manual input. Now, let's talk about how to scale without touching your account, because that's really kind of what this is hopefully delivering you, right? So once your rules, structure, and creative pipeline are in place, scaling really becomes hands-off. Your only job is to basically refresh creatives and review performance, maybe adjusting some thresholds of some rules, and ultimately figuring out what happens off the platform. Now, I've done this often where that testing process is constant, meaning we're always testing new things, but new ads don't really go live more than once or twice a month, sometimes once or twice a quarter. Because once you figure this out and those ads are getting turned off and coming back on, and you're resetting sort of your baseline, like you don't need to do a lot more work. And pro tip, once you get to a place where you're just kind of driving down your average, like I talked about getting from 60 to a 12, that ad that was great at 60 because it drove a 50 wasn't any good anymore when you're at a 45 because, well, it drove a 50. But if you launch it again at the 45, odds are that ad, and by that I mean you rebuilt the ad, same copy, same creative, but new post ID, because it's now leveraging a new set of data. It's learning how to do its job with its job definition basically being a higher quality of work. Well, there's nothing to say that that ad doesn't come in at a 35 or a 40. I've done this over and over again where I didn't even have to do new ads. Just the ads that ultimately got sunset, I waited a little bit and launched an identical copy of it. And well, lo and behold, the ad that crushes again. But instead of crushing at 60 down to 55, it's crushing at 45 down to 40. You can do this over and over again. And the beauty of that is also our entire rest of the funnel was built around that ad, right? So the landing page decisions, the offer construction, the emails, the search was built around the type of attention that ad brought in. So that multimedia mix was set up with the Facebook ads in place. If I can just relaunch that same ad, but now it's just better because on day one, it's learning what success looks like, with success being more efficient, mazel tov. I don't have to do more work. Like, it is really this easy. The system is gonna handle budget increases, optimizations, pausing losers, and reactivating winners. This is what true leverage looks like. Maximizing growth with minimal intervention. This is how I manage millions a week on a couple of hours max. Like, sometimes the only reason I log into the ads platform is for the dopamine hit. Like, it really is that easy. Now, I wanna talk about a couple challenges and their solutions. Even with automated systems, advertisers will face common challenges like inconsistent data, delayed tracking, or creative burnout. The solution isn't more complexity, it's better systems. Use historical data for decision-making, focus on creative refresh cycles, and avoid chasing attribution by trusting trend performance over single-day wins. Really, this is all about making sure that when you make a decision, it's a well-informed decision based off of trends, not single data points, and that you're trying to solve the problem by making things simpler. Now, obviously, going from 0 automated rules to 5 or 10 live in your account is a level of complexity, sure. But doing that once and not having to do that work every day ever again wildly simplifies things, right? So it's a large investment now for 0 investment required later. That's what it's all about. Okay, so let's keep going. The key to sustainable scaling lies in automation, not in micromanagement. By integrating rules-based systems across scaling, optimization, and creative testing, you build an infrastructure that grows your business over time. Your role evolves from a media buyer to a strategist, someone who oversees a self-optimizing ecosystem. And to be very clear here, the automation isn't just your rules. It's CBO, it's DCTs or flex ads in 322. It's broad targeting. It's knowing when to use the right Advantage Plus stuff or not, right? It's letting the machine do as much work. Really, the automated rules here are just taking some of the manual labor out of your hands that really, if it was a button on the machine, you would let it do anyway. So let's just program the machine to not need us so we can spend our times enjoying life or doing the things that are just more important or more valuable, like improving the customer journey, raising the AOV, raising the second purchase rate, raising the LTV, improving our search, our email, our CRO, or just enjoying life. Like, that's completely possible. That's how people are living on laptops on beaches, traveling the world, working a couple hours a day, making a couple million. Like, you can 100% do this. So I promised you a final checklist before launch. This is a sheet. I want you to print it out. I want you to slap it to the wall. And I want to make sure that you go through each of these steps before you do anything, okay? All right, let's take a look at it. You need to define your CPA targets and thresholds. Set naming conventions for auto-optimizer eligibility. Build stop loss and scaling rules. Design your 322 ad test pipeline. Set reactivation logic and evaluation timelines. Document everything in your SOPs. Launch and let the system do the work for you. That is what you need to know. Now, if you have any questions on any of this stuff, please feel free to ask them in the comment section down below. And I'm going to throw this up on the screen here real quick. This is a QR code to jump into Disruptor Academy if you haven't already. This is where we talk about all of this stuff and so much more, where if you jump into there, I can help you walk through all of these rules and help you make sure that they're completely set up properly if you don't want to necessarily jump into the MBA or the Inner Circle just yet. Now, all that to be said, we have a lot more of these videos coming. I've been sitting down and writing a bunch. If you have any questions, please let me know. I made another great video for you. It's right here. That, like this one, didn't phone it in. Everything is there for you. I really hope you enjoy it. Again, down below, ask me any questions if you have them. There's a link to Disruptor Academy down there. And until next time, I'll see you on the internet. Bye.